Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I had a gentleman from Minnesota send me a story. His name is Eric Rasmussen, and he works at KSTP. And he said, Steve, check out this story we just did here on KSTP. It'll be near and dear to your heart. It's something you talk a lot about in your channel. And just thought you should know that. So this story was sent to me by the Eric Rasmussen, who wrote the story. So that's pretty cool. So the headline is, he was an unwilling passenger in a high-speed chase, and police still seized his car. Yeah, they determined he'd done nothing wrong, but they kept his car. So I'll put a link to the news piece in the description below the video so you can watch the version on the TV station that Eric Rasmussen is in. So shortly after police used spike strips to end a high-speed chase on I-90 last July, the owner of the car jumped out and pleaded with the officers about how he was innocent because he was a passenger in the car, and the driver is the one who made the decision to take off and run from the police. Dash camera and body camera video obtained by 5 Investigates shows the man getting out of the passenger side with his hands up. He can be heard saying to a police officer, "I told him to stop. I was yelling at him, fighting with him in the car." Now, officers arrested the driver and another passenger, but he did not end up facing any criminal charges. But the police told him they were still going to take his Nissan Altima. An officer can be heard saying in the body camera video, "We're seizing it now. It's the state of Minnesota's." And at one point in time, the officers are actually fist bumping and congratulating each other on the fact that they're going to be seizing another car. So I encourage you to watch the video and see what we're talking about here. The man later said he did not immediately understand what the police were saying. I thought they were just taking it, like impounding it or something. I didn't think they were going to keep it. The county attorney filed a civil action to permanently take the man's car through civil asset forfeiture. It's an example of how police in Minnesota can still seize and keep the property of people even when they're not charged with a crime, despite recent reforms to help protect innocent owners. Critics say it also reinforces concerns the practice disproportionately impacts low-income communities and minorities, especially in Nobles County, which has been repeatedly accused of violating the civil rights of minorities. It's those people who are hit the hardest when their car or a small amount of money is seized from them, and that can sometimes put their lives into a tailspin, says Dan Elbin, senior attorney with the nonprofit Institute for Justice. You can see how all of my interests come together because I love the Institute for Justice. Now, the man here is Laotian, said he'd never heard of forfeiture when a friend asked him for a late-night ride from Sioux Falls, South Dakota to Worthington on the 4th of July last year. And so the man said he was concerned that he was too sleepy to drive. So he thought to himself, well, having somebody in the car with me will help keep me awake. And then sometime during the trip, he actually said, "Could you take over?" Because he knows the guy, and he says, "Can you drive?" So he switched seats, and he fell asleep. While he was sleeping, the friend picked up a woman, and that was part of the issue here. And then the police, of course, decided to pull the guy and everybody over, presumably because they were speeding, but we're not quite sure because the man fell asleep. And all he knows is he woke up when somebody said, "Hey, there's a cop." And at that point, the driver steps on it. And so now the man who owns the car is in the passenger seat. And he said, "I told him to stop." And now he's wondering, what did they do wrong? Like, why are they in a high-speed chase in my car? Why don't they just pull over? Well, it turns out that the friend and the woman he picked up both had warrants out for their arrest. They were eventually convicted, but prosecutors dropped charges against the owner of the car. So he did not know that this guy had a warrant out for his arrest. And we have no idea what that warrant actually is for either, the way the story is written. So Nobles County filed a civil action to take the man's car. A judge ruled that the owner was not an innocent owner, as he was present in the vehicle, and he took no reasonable steps to prevent the crime. If you woke up in your car and the car is doing 100 miles an hour, it's a police car chasing you, what do? Grab the wheel? Start fighting with the driver? And by the way, there's also a passenger in the back seat. And we can only speculate as to what might happen if you were to attack the driver during a high-speed chase when the driver's girlfriend is in the back seat and she and the driver both have warrants out for their arrest. So it's unclear to me what he was supposed to do. And I'd love to know what the judge thought he should have done. What's a reasonable way to stop them? The owner of the car asks. I kept yelling and yelling, but there's no other way to make him stop. If I hit him, what's going to happen? We're all going to die. Now, the police department declined to comment on this case or any other case, despite the fact that 5 Investigates requested multiple times for comment. After 5 Investigates highlighted similar cases in 2020, state lawmakers responded to growing calls for change and reformed parts of the controversial forfeiture law in Minnesota. The law allows police and prosecutors to keep up to 90% of the proceeds. The reforms including prohibitions on police taking small amounts of cash, as well as additional protections for innocent owners of vehicles. In Nobles County, a judge previously criticized police and prosecutors for using civil forfeiture to try to keep a woman's car after her nephew was pulled over and arrested driving it. The judge said, I'm baffled as to why the county is proceeding with this forfeiture action. I think this proceeding, with all due respect, has been a bit of an exercise in what seems to me to be a ridiculous conclusion. In that case, the judge ordered the vehicle to be returned to its owner. Now, the city of Worthington later paid $60,000 to settle an excessive force lawsuit after dash camera video showed a police officer repeatedly striking the driver as he pulled from that car. Again, watch the video, you'll see it there. And it's one of those things where you know darn well if that video didn't exist, nothing would have happened. It is one of several cases where Worthington or Nobles County has been accused of discrimination in policing. Generally, what we're seeing is disproportionate policing of minority communities, says Ian Bratley, an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union. That's supported not just in our observations, but statistically. A 5 Investigates analysis of every forfeiture case in that county over the last decade revealed people of color were involved in at least half of them. And they actually did the homework on this. They actually pulled every single forfeiture case in the decade to see what was going on there. Meanwhile, the attorney for the Institute for Justice said that these findings mirror national studies. There's ample data nationwide from a number of states, a number of cities, showing that there is a racially disproportionate impact from civil forfeiture. In 2021, the Institute published a survey of forfeiture victims in Philadelphia, which found forfeiture was clustered in predominantly minority and low-income areas. It's those people who are hit the hardest when their car or small amount of money is seized, and that can sometimes put their lives into a tailspin. Meanwhile, the man here said losing his car cost him hours at his job as he tried to save money to buy the vehicle back from the county. After all that, I couldn't pay my rent, and then he was evicted. In March, the owner here showed 5 Investigates where his Nissan Altima is currently sitting, behind the Prairie Justice Center in Worthington, along with more than a half dozen other vehicles seized by police. He says seeing the car reminds him of how much he's lost after that one night nearly a year ago. I'm never going to forget it. It ruined my life. And that's one of the most interesting things about the story here by KSTP out of Minnesota is that the car is currently sitting in a parking lot just behind, I think, a police station. Might be a courthouse, but there's some legal facility that's there, and there's a parking lot behind it. And this man's car is sitting there, kind of snowed in by a couple snowbanks, with all flat tires, just sitting there. And now, presumably, if they seized it and it belongs to them, they can dispose of it and pocket the money. But if they let the car rot and then dispose of it, they'll get almost nothing for it. So why do they seize the car then? And it appears to be punitive in nature. They're simply seizing the car because they're trying to punish this guy for letting someone else drive it. And as we've talked before, civil asset forfeiture can only be made to make sense with mental gymnastics. You actually have got to jump through some really weird hoops in your head for it to make any sense, because people say, oh, we're not accusing you of a crime, we're accusing your thing of a crime. See, your car was used in a crime, therefore your car is guilty of something. That's actually the logic behind it. And so if the car is guilty of a crime and they seize it through civil asset forfeiture, then they can dispose of it and that money then goes to them. But when they take the car from somebody and just let it sit someplace for a year and then sell it and dispose of it and they get almost nothing for it. Because what do you get? And by the way, there are guys in my audience, and gals, who go to auctions, okay? So ask yourself this: how much does this Nissan Altima from 2014 get at auction with 4 flat tires? And I understand they might air those tires up, but it's been sitting for over a year, and it's dragged across the block someplace and sold at auction. What's that car going to sell for? What's it going to sell for? And it might sell for a couple $100. It might sell for $1,000. Would it sell for much more than that? Because no one's vouching for its ability to run or drive, and it's been parked for almost a year, okay? And so if they sell it and it realizes a couple $100, I would like to point out that notwithstanding any of the other arguments about civil asset forfeiture you can make, all of which are good, by the way, I like to point out the ones that some people don't think about. This is wasteful. It's wasteful. This guy had a car. It was dependable enough to get him to and from work and to and from 4th of July celebrations and so on. And as he pointed out, it was vital for him and his livelihood. So when the state takes it from him and then auctions it for a couple $100, well, he can't replace it for a couple $100. Now, there was an indication here that they offered to sell it back to him. And I don't know how much they offered to sell it back to him for, but I suspect they want top dollar for it because they can do anything they want with it now because it's theirs. As the police officer said, it's the state of Minnesota's now. And so watch the video, watch the police officers fist bumping on when they realize that they get to keep this car as if they somehow won. And then also watch how they remove the other driver from the car in the case where they're ordered to pay $60,000 because their removal was incorrect. So that will be in the video that's in the description below this, my video. So Eric Rasmussen sent that to me. Thank you very much from KSTP. And the headline is great. He was an unwilling passenger in a high-speed chase, and then police seized his car. And remember, they did that after the reforms took place, which obviously don't help him any. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. My goal is no longer to get more done, but rather to have less to do.